The words that shattered my world didn't come from a stranger or a sworn enemy. They came from my own daughter, her voice dripping with a contempt so cold it froze the very air in my lungs. "You don't belong at this table," she said, her eyes, the same hazel as her father's, holding not a flicker of love, only a flat, dismissive disgust. And I, Eleanor Marie Croft, who had wiped her tears and bandaged her knees and sold my favorite pearl necklace to buy her the dress she desperately wanted for her junior prom, could only sit there in my own dining room, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 family dinners, and feel my heart turn to dust. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you'd lay down your life for, then you know the special kind of hell that opens up beneath your feet. Stay with me. This is the story of how I found my way out of that abyss, and how the very table they exiled me from became the stage for their ultimate humiliation. I need to take you back, before the bitterness took root. You have to understand what we were, so you can truly grasp the depth of what we became. Our life in Crestwood Falls wasn't extravagant, but it was solid, built on what I thought was an unshakable foundation. My husband David and I met in college. He was an engineering major with a shy smile that could light up a lecture hall, and I was studying art history, forever lost in centuries past. Our first date was a picnic by the lake, cheap wine and cheaper cheese, talking until the mosquitoes drove us away. We built our life brick by brick. David's firm, Croft Engineering, started in our garage with a second-hand drafting table and a mountain of debt. I was his secretary, his bookkeeper, his cheerleader. I'd stay up with him, my pregnant belly pressed against the desk as I typed up proposals, the click-clack of the keyboard a lullaby for the child growing inside me. That child was Chloe, our miracle baby. She had my curly hair, though a shade lighter, like spun gold when she was little. David's serious eyes, but when she laughed, which was often, her whole face would crinkle and the sun itself seemed to shine from within her. Our little house on Maple Drive was filled with the sounds of her giggles, the scent of my baking, and the steady, reassuring presence of David. We were a trio, a perfect, harmonious unit. We'd have pancake breakfasts on Saturday mornings, the kitchen radio tuned to some oldie station, and David would spin me around on the checkerboard linoleum while Chloe clapped her hands and demanded a turn. We saved for years, scrimping and sacrificing, to buy the land on Oak Crest Circle. It was a wooded lot overlooking the town, and we'd park our old station wagon there on Sundays, eating sandwiches and dreaming up the house we'd one day build. David drew the plans himself. A wide porch for swing sets and lemonade stands, a big kitchen with a farmhouse sink where I could wash vegetables from the garden I promised to plant, and a dining room. Oh, the dining room. It was to have a long, custom-made oak table, big enough for all the family and friends we'd host for holidays and birthdays. That table was the symbol of everything we were working for, a place of belonging, a seat for everyone we loved. When Croft Engineering landed the state infrastructure contract, the dream suddenly had a bank account to match. The house on Oak Crest became a reality. It was more beautiful than I'd ever imagined. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows in the living room, gleaming off the honey-colored hardwood floors David had insisted on. The kitchen was a masterpiece of marble and stainless steel, and my garden, well, it became my sanctuary. Roses, hydrangeas, and a stubborn patch of lavender that refused to bloom for 2 seasons, but finally burst forth in a fragrant purple haze. And the dining table. It was magnificent. 8 feet of solid, gleaming oak, hand-rubbed to a warm glow. We hosted our first Thanksgiving there. My mother was still alive then, beaming from the head of the table David insisted I take. Chloe, 16 and radiant, passed around the sweet potato casserole. David carved the turkey, his eyes meeting mine over the steaming bird, a silent message of "we did it" passing between us. The room was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, the smell of roasted turkey and sage. I felt a contentment so profound it was almost a physical thing, a warm blanket wrapped around my soul. This was it. This was the life we'd fought for. The first crack in my perfect world wasn't a quake. It was a hairline fracture, so fine, I almost missed it. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just come in from the garden, my hands smelling of earth and tomato vines, and I was arranging a bouquet of zinnias in a vase for the dining table. Chloe was home from college for the weekend, She'd been quieter than usual, her phone constantly buzzing, her thumbs flying across the screen with a focused intensity. "Everything all right, honey?" I asked, snipping the stem of a particularly vibrant purple flower. "You seem preoccupied." She didn't look up from her phone. "Just stuff, Mom. You wouldn't get it." The dismissal was subtle, a tiny paper cut. "Try me," I said, keeping my voice light. "I might surprise you." She finally glanced up, and her expression was impatient. "It's just this party at the Kensington's lake house. Everyone's going. It's a big deal." "The Kensingtons?" I frowned. "As in Charles Kensington, the developer? I didn't know you ran in those circles." Charles Kensington was a notoriously sharp businessman, all flash and expensive suits. The antithesis of David's quiet, steady diligence. "Bradley Kensington is in my poli-sci seminar," she said, as if explaining something simple to a very slow child. "He's amazing. His family is incredible. Their house is like something out of a magazine, Mom. Not?" She trailed off, but her eyes did a quick, dismissive sweep of our beautiful kitchen, our beautiful home that her father had designed with love. "Not what, Chloe?" I asked, the vase suddenly cold in my hands. "Not so lived in," she said, landing on the phrase with a faint sneer. "Everything here is so practical. Dad's whole function over form thing. The Kensingtons have a Matisse in their foyer, a real one." "We have a home," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "A home we built together. That's worth more than any painting." She sighed, a long-suffering sound I'd never heard from her before. "See? I knew you wouldn't get it." Her phone buzzed again. "Bradley's here. Don't wait up." And she was gone, the front door closing with a soft click that echoed in the sudden silence of the kitchen. I stood there, holding my zinnias, the scent of dirt on my hands now smelling only of loss. I brushed it off. She was young. She was impressionable. Bradley Kensington was a handsome boy from a wealthy family. Of course she'd be dazzled. I mentioned it to David that night as we got ready for bed. "She's just spreading her wings, Ellie," he said, patting my shoulder from his side of the bathroom sink. He was focused on his reflection, meticulously trimming his beard. "It's a phase. She'll remember where she comes from." But his tone was absent, his mind already on the next day's meetings. I told myself he was right. I was overreacting. The fracture was so small. I chose to ignore it. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythm, or at least, a convincing imitation of it. Chloe went back to college. David's business was booming, requiring more late nights and weekend meetings. "The Kensington account is a game changer, Ellie," he'd say, his voice buzzing with a excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Charles is talking about a full merger. Croft Kensington Engineering, can you imagine?" I could imagine. It meant more money, more status, but it also meant David was constantly at the Kensingtons, sprawling estate, playing golf with Charles, having dinners with him and his wife, the impeccably cold Vanessa. David started coming home with a new edge. He'd critique the wine I served, a nice Pinot Noir he'd always loved. "Charles has a cellar that would make your head spin," he'd murmur. He bought new suits, sharper, more expensive. He started talking about upgrading our cars, our furniture, our lifestyle. The undercurrent of tension was there, a faint hum beneath the surface of our normalcy. I'd set a plate of his favorite meatloaf in front of him, and he'd eat it quickly, almost mechanically. "Vanessa has a private chef trained in Paris," he mentioned once, wiping his mouth. "We should look into that, free you up from so much kitchen work." "I like the kitchen work," I said, my fork clinking a little too loudly against my plate. "This is my home, David, not a showroom." He'd looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second I saw my David, the man from the picnic blanket, but it was gone in a flash, replaced by a vague irritation. "No one's saying it's a showroom, Ellie. I'm just talking about making things easier, more efficient." The word was a slap. Efficient. Our home, our life, was now something to be optimized by a man taking lessons from Charles Kensington. The holidays rolled around. Thanksgiving was different. Chloe was home, but she was a stranger in a designer dress, her phone permanently grafted to her hand. She spent most of the day texting, a secret little smile playing on her lips. Bradley Kensington was coming for dessert, she announced, as if bestowing a great honor upon us. David was buzzing around, rearranging the very centerpiece I'd made, critiquing the arrangement of the appetizers. Charles and Vanessa are used to a certain presentation, he fretted, adjusting a cheese knife by a millimeter. They're coming for pie, David, not a state dinner, I said, trying to laugh it off, but the sound fell flat. When the Kensingtons arrived, it was like a royal visitation. Charles, a large man with a booming voice and a watch that probably cost more than our first car, clapped David on the back. Dave, this is a nice little place you've got here. Cozy. The word cozy sounded like an insult in his mouth. Vanessa, a woman so thin and perfectly put together she looked like she'd been laminated, offered me a cheek as cold and smooth as marble when I greeted her. Eleanor. What a hearty smell. Her nose wrinkled almost imperceptibly at the rich, familiar sense of turkey and pumpkin spice that had always meant joy to me. Bradley Kensington was exactly as I'd pictured, tall, blonde, with the relaxed arrogance of someone who has never been told no. He barely acknowledged me, his attention solely on Chloe. They whispered in a corner, their body language excluding everyone else in the room. We sat at my beautiful table. My mother's china was set out, the good silver, but the meal felt like a performance. David and Charles talked mergers and markets, their conversation a dull roar that drowned out any chance for real family talk. Vanessa picked at her slice of pecan pie, moving the nuts around with her fork as if conducting a microscopic inspection. It was then that Chloe dropped the bomb. It was so casual, so offhand, it took a moment for the words to register. So Dad, Bradley and I were thinking, she began, smiling at David, with a sweetness she hadn't shown me in months. After graduation, his dad has an amazing opportunity for him. A development project in the Bahamas, luxury villas, and he wants me to come with him, to manage the client relations side. I felt the air leave the room. The Bahamas? I managed to say. Chloe, that's so far away. What about your job prospects here? What about… Oh, Mom, please. She cut me off, her smile turning brittle. This is a real opportunity, not some entry-level desk job in Crestwood. She said the name of our town like it was a synonym for dull. David, to my utter shock, was beaming. The Bahamas! Charles, that's incredible. What a chance for them. Gotta let the young eagles fly, Dave, Charles boomed, raising his glass of our wine. Bradley's got a great head on his shoulders. And your girl here? She's sharp, a real asset. They toasted. To the Bahamas, to young eagles, to assets. I sat there, my pie turning to ash in my mouth. My daughter was planning to run off to a foreign country with a boy she'd known for a few months, and my husband was celebrating it. The fracture was widening, and I could feel the foundation of my life beginning to groan under the strain. The escalation was slow, then all at once. Chloe's visits home became less about seeing us, and more about packing her childhood away into boxes, a process that felt like a physical amputation. Each stuffed animal tossed into a donation bin, each book taken off the shelf, was a piece of our history she was casually discarding. The argument started. Small at first, then louder, uglier. You're throwing away your future for a summer fling, I pleaded with her one afternoon in her bedroom, holding a framed photo of her and David building a sandcastle on the Cape. You just can't stand that I'm moving beyond this suffocating little life you've built, she shot back, snatching the photo from me and putting it in a box marked, donate. Suffocating? We loved you. We gave you everything. You gave me expectations, rules. Bradley's family sees potential. They see a future. You and Dad just see a little girl to keep safe in her little room. The gossip in town started. I'd overhear snippets at the grocery store, at the library. Did you hear about David Croft's girl? Running off with the Kensington boy. Lucky family, marrying into that kind of money. Eleanor doesn't look too happy about it. Guess she's not ready to cut the cord? The humiliation was a constant, low-grade fever. My family, my child, had become the subject of pitying glances and whispered speculation. David was no help. He was fully immersed in the Kensington world. He started taking their side in arguments. Ellie, you're being irrational. Bradley is a fine young man. Charles is a visionary. This merger is the best thing that's ever happened to us." "Us?" I cried one night. "David, look at me. This isn't us. You're changing everything. For them!" "I'm evolving, Ellie," he shouted back, his face flushed with that anger I rarely saw. "Something you seem incapable of doing. You're stuck in the past, in this shrine to a life we've outgrown." He stormed out, going to clear his head, which I knew meant going to the Kensingtons to complain about his hopelessly provincial wife. I was alone in the big, beautiful, cozy house he now seemed to despise. And then, the false kindness. The manipulation. It was Chloe who delivered it. She came to me one evening, her expression softer than it had been in weeks. She sat beside me on the porch swing, the very one David had installed for our anniversary. "Mom," she began, her voice gentle, "I know this is hard for you, I get it." The sudden shift disarmed me completely. The ice around my heart cracked a little. "Oh, honey. I've been talking to Bradley and his mom," she continued, taking my hand. Her skin was so soft. "My little girl's hand. We all want you to be happy. We know this transition is tough. Vanessa, she's amazing, Mom. She's been such a mentor to me. And she has an idea." I was so desperate for this connection, for this return of my daughter, that I listened, my guard crumbling. "She thinks you need a project. Something to make you feel relevant again. She's on the board of the Crestwood Historical Society. They're desperate for a new curator. It's mostly just organizing old photos and giving tours to school kids. But it's something. It would get you out of the house, make you feel useful." The word useful should have been a warning flare, but I was so hungry for her approval, for any olive branch, that I saw it as kindness. A misguided, slightly insulting kindness, but kindness nonetheless. You talked to Vanessa Kensington about me?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Of course I did, Mom. We're family. We all care about you." She squeezed my hand. "Just think about it. It would make Dad and me so happy to see you engaged with something." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She presented my isolation and humiliation as my problem, one that a quaint, unpaid, and utterly trivial hobby could solve, and she made it seem like a gift. A peace offering. I was so lonely, so heartsick, that I almost accepted it. I told her I would think about it, and the smile she gave me was brilliant, triumphant, and utterly empty. The stakes skyrocketed. It was no longer just about my daughter's affections. It was about my home, my financial security, my entire past. David came to me a week later with a stack of papers. His face was grave, but there was a strange energy buzzing beneath the surface. "Ellie, we need to talk about the future." "What's this?" I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I'd been making his favorite chicken soup, a pathetic attempt to reconnect with the man I remembered. "It's the merger agreement. Croft Kensington, it's finally happening." "That's great, David," I said cautiously. "I'm happy for you. It's not just for me, it's for us, for our future." He pushed the papers toward me. "There's a lot of capital required up front from my end, a show of good faith. Charles is putting in the lion's share, but I need to contribute my part." A cold trickle of dread started in my stomach. "What part?" "We need to leverage our assets. The house, Ellie." The words hung in the air between us, ugly and impossible. "The house?" I whispered. "You want to mortgage our home? For a business deal?" "It's not just a deal. It's our legacy. This company will be worth 10 times what it is now in 5 years. This house is just bricks and wood. The equity in it is just sitting there. This is what that equity is for, to build something greater." He was talking about the home we'd built with love and sweat and dreams, as if it were a stock option. A liquid asset. "David, no. This is our home. This is where we raised Chloe. This is everything." "That's the problem, Ellie," he exploded, slamming his hand on the table. The soup pot on the stove rattled. "You're so sentimental about things. You're holding us back. This is a business decision, and a sound one. I need you to sign these papers." I looked down at the documents. Legal jargon swam before my eyes. But one number was clear. The loan amount. $1.2 million. Against our paid-off home. "I won't do it, David. I won't risk our home." His face darkened. You're my wife. You're supposed to support me. I have supported you. I supported you when we were eating ramen noodles in that garage. This isn't support, this is insanity. If you don't sign, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous calm I'd never heard before, you will be responsible for destroying this family's future. Is that what you want? To be the anchor that drags us all down? The shift happened in that moment. It wasn't a slow dawning. It was a violent, seismic jolt. This wasn't just about David being dazzled by a wealthy family or Chloe being in love with a handsome boy. This was darker. This was calculated. My husband, the man I'd built a life with, was trying to emotionally blackmail me into risking the roof over our heads for a business deal with a man he'd known for less than a year. The love of my life was looking at me not with affection but with cold, hard calculation. The mask had slipped and I saw the stranger beneath. The isolation that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and light out of my world. David moved into the guest bedroom. I need space to think, he said, which was code for, I can't stand the sight of you and your disloyalty. Meals were silent affairs, if we ate together at all. The only sounds in the house were the ticking of the grandfather clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Choice stopped coming home altogether. When I called her, it went straight to voicemail. Texts went unanswered for days, and then the replies were terse. Busy. In meetings. Talk later. Later never came. I tried to reach out to old friends. Susan from the garden club invited me for coffee. I started to spill my guts, my voice trembling, about David, the mortgage, the chilling change in my daughter. Susan listened, but her eyes were darting around the cafe, uncomfortable. Oh, Ellie, she said, patting my hand when I was done. Marriages go through rough patches. And teenagers, well, they're teenagers. I'm sure it's not as bad as it seems. David is such a good man. And Chloe is a darling. You're probably just stressed. She changed the subject to her new patio furniture. I never called her again. I was alone. Truly, utterly alone. The life I had built, the family I had cherished, the friends I had cultivated, had all evaporated like mist. I'd walk through the empty rooms of my house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood, and feel like a ghost in my own life. I'd sit at that vast dining table, just me at one end and the crushing silence at the other. I'd remember the laughter, the warmth, the feeling of belonging, and the memory was so painful it was physical. This was what they had reduced me to. A lonely woman in a beautiful, empty house, staring at a past that had been systematically dismantled. It was on one of those endless, silent nights that I finally broke. I was in David's study. His study, he'd started calling it that, looking for a book. I pulled a heavy volume on structural engineering from a high shelf, and a manila envelope that had been tucked behind it fluttered to the floor. Papers spilled out. I sighed, kneeling to gather them up, assuming they were old blueprints. But they weren't. They were financial statements. For an account I didn't recognize. Croft Holdings. LLC. The statements were recent. And they showed massive transfers. $250,000 to a numbered shell company in the Cayman Islands. $175,000 to a V. Kensington as a consulting fee. And regular, smaller withdrawals, $5,000, $10,000. Always in cash. My hands began to shake. This wasn't business. This was something else. Something secret. This was the proof I hadn't known I was looking for. The first tangible crack in the beautiful, terrible facade. This was discovery number one. I didn't confront him. Not yet. The old Ellie would have stormed into the guest bedroom, waving the papers, demanding an explanation. The new Ellie, the one who was learning to live in the silence, knew better. That would give away my hand. Instead, I carefully, meticulously, put everything back exactly as I found it. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not with panic, but with a new, fierce purpose. The game had changed. I just didn't know all the rules yet. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Vanessa Kensington. She stood on my porch, immaculate in a cream-colored linen suit, a faint, condescending smile on her perfectly lined lips. "Eleanor, I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd pop in." I wanted to slam the door in her face, but I didn't. I let her in. She glided into my living room, her eyes doing that quick, assessing sweep, taking inventory of my cozy life. "Can I get you some tea?" I asked, my voice hollow. "No, thank you." "This isn't a social call." She sat on the edge of my sofa, as if afraid to get too comfortable. "I'm here about David. And Chloe?" I remained standing. "What about them?" "They're worried about you, Eleanor. Truly. We all are." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that smelled of mint and money. "This resistance of yours, this refusal to embrace the future, it's becoming a problem. David is under immense stress. The merger is delicate. Your intransigence regarding the house is seen as a sign of bad faith, a lack of belief in your own husband." I said nothing. I just watched her. "And Chloe," she continued, her smile turning pitying, "she's embarrassed. A young woman starting a new life, a powerful life, with a man like Bradley. She can't have this kind of baggage. A mother who is clinging to the past, causing scenes, refusing to evolve. It reflects poorly on her, on all of us." This was betrayer's power. This was her, sitting in my home, telling me that my love for my family and my home was baggage, that my refusal to hand over my equity was a scene. She was gloating under the thin veneer of concern. She was here to humiliate me into submission. "What do you want, Vanessa?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "I want you to be reasonable. Sign the papers. Support your husband. Be happy for your daughter. Or," she paused, letting the word hang in the air, "if you cannot do that, then at least have the decency to get out of their way. Stop holding them back. You're drowning, Eleanor, and you're trying to take them down with you. It's pathetic." She stood up, smoothing her suit. "Think about what's best for everyone, not just yourself." And with that, she left, leaving behind the faint, expensive scent of her perfume and the corrosive poison of her words. I stood in the silent living room for a long time. Her words should have crushed me. Instead, they ignited me. Pathetic baggage. Intransigence. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They had no idea what they had just awakened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house, Vanessa's words echoing in my head. I ended up in the basement, in a corner where we stored old trunks of memories. I opened one, the smell of cedar and old paper wafting out. Photo albums. Baby clothes. Chloe's first pair of shoes. And at the very bottom, a small, wooden box. I lifted the lid. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, tied with a faded ribbon. Letters from David to me, from our first year of dating, when he'd gone home for the summer, and we'd written to each other every day. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon and picked up the first one. The paper was thin, the ink slightly faded. "My dearest Ellie," it began. "It's only been a week and it feels like a year. I miss you so much it's a physical ache. I was walking by the lake today and I saw a couple on a picnic blanket, and it was like looking at a ghost of us. I promise you, Ellie, I will build a life for us that is so full of love and laughter. You'll never have a reason to miss anything ever again. We'll have a home that's ours, a family that's ours, a table where everyone has a place. I will spend my life making you feel safe and cherished and loved. You are my home. Always. All my love, David." I read letter after letter. Each one was a love poem, a promise, a blueprint of the life we had indeed built together. The man who wrote these words was not the man who now slept in my guest bedroom and called me an anchor. These were the words of my David. The real David. The one who had been slowly erased by greed and ambition and the toxic influence of Charles Kensington. The contrast was unbearable. The tenderness on the page versus the coldness in my home. The promises versus the betrayal. It was a double agony. I wasn't just mourning my present, I was mourning the past that had been so thoroughly corrupted. I cried then. Hot, silent tears that fell on the old paper, smudging the ink of promises that were now lies. The next morning, fueled by a grief that had hardened into resolve, I went back to David's study. I had to know more. The financial papers I'd found were a thread, and I needed to pull it. I waited until he left for work, then I went in. I started with his filing cabinet. It was locked. Of course it was. The old David never locked anything. I looked around the room. Where would he hide a key? I thought about the man he used to be. Sentimental. Predictable. His favorite book had always been To Kill a Mockingbird. He'd read it to Chloe. There was a worn copy on his shelf. I pulled it out. And there, tucked into the pages where Atticus Finch shoots the rabid dog, was a small silver key. My hands were steady as I fit it into the lock of the filing cabinet. It turned with a soft click. The drawer slid open. It was full of hanging files, neatly labeled taxes, business, personal, property. I went straight to property. Our house deed was there. I pulled it out. I'd seen it 100 times. Our two names, Eleanor Marie Croft and David James Croft, joined together as tenants in common. But something looked different. The paper felt newer. There was a second page attached, a recent addendum. I read it, my eyes scanning the legalese. And then the world dropped out from under me. It was a quitclaim deed, dated 6 months ago. It stated that Eleanor Marie Croft, for the sum of $1 and other valuable consideration, hereby transferred all her right, title, and interest in the property at our address solely to David James Croft. My name was signed at the bottom. It was a very good forgery. It looked almost exactly like my signature, but the E was wrong. I always looped my E's. This one was sharp, angular, a copy, a fake. He had forged my signature. He had stolen my home out from under me. I sank into his desk chair, the paper rattling in my hands. This was discovery number 2, the double betrayal. It wasn't just that he wanted me to sign a mortgage. He'd already made sure I had no house to mortgage. The business merger, the pressure, it was all a smokescreen. The real goal was to get me out. To take everything. To leave me with nothing. The shock was so profound it was numbing. I felt a strange, cold, calm settle over me. The grieving was over. The hoping was over. The woman who loved picnics by the lake and believed in promises written on thin paper was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone with nothing left to lose. This was where I found my hidden strength. It didn't feel strong. It felt like steel being forged in ice. It was a quiet, grim determination. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. They thought I was alone. They were wrong. I had nothing. But I had everything to fight for. My home. My past. My very identity. And I would fight not with tears or screams, but with their own weapons. Secrecy, strategy, and the cold, hard truth. I made a plan. It started with silence. Absolute, impeccable silence. I put the deed back exactly as I found it. I locked the cabinet. I returned the key to the book. I erased all evidence of my presence. That night, I made David's favorite meatloaf. I asked him polite questions about his day. I was the picture of subdued resignation. I could see the triumph in his eyes. He thought Vanessa's visit had worked. He thought I was broken. He was so wrong. The next day, I went to the library, using a computer there instead of my own. I needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed a shark. I needed someone who lived for this kind of fight. I searched for the best, most ruthless forensic divorce and fraud attorneys in the state. I found 3 names. One stood out, Elizabeth Vance. Her website was sleek, professional, and her bio mentioned she was a former federal prosecutor. She specialized in, quote, complex marital asset dissolution and financial fraud. Her reviews were from clients who used words like pit bull, and lifesaver. I called from a payphone near the post office. I didn't want any trace on my cell phone bill. Vance and Associates, a crisp voice answered. I need to speak to Elizabeth Vance, I said, my voice low. Tell her a woman is about to lose her home and she's ready to fight back. There was a pause. Can I tell her what this is regarding? Betrayal, I said simply, and a forged deed. That got her attention. I was put on hold for less than 10 seconds. This is Elizabeth Vance. The voice was calm, authoritative, and sharp as a razor. I told her everything. The merger, the pressure, the financial papers, the forged deed. I spoke in a cold, clear monotone. All the emotion burned out of me. I was just stating facts. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mrs. Croft? She said finally, can you be at my office tomorrow at 10? Use the back entrance, and bring what you found. The betrayer's final cruelty came on a Sunday. We were having a tense, silent breakfast when David's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then at me, a smug smile playing on his lips. That was Charles. They're having a family brunch at the club. He invited me and Chloe. He said, and I quote, "There's room at the table if Eleanor wants to join us." The way he said it made it clear the invitation was an afterthought, a pity gesture. I looked down at my toast. That's nice. You should go. Aren't you going to get dressed? He asked, his tone dripping with false concern. It's at the Crestwood Club, Ellie. They have a dress code. He looked pointedly at my worn robe. This was it, the final humiliation. The reminder that I didn't fit into their new world, that I was an embarrassment, that I didn't belong at their table. I'm fine here, I said softly, playing my part. He shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference. Suit yourself. He got up, whistling as he went to get dressed. An hour later, he left, looking handsome and successful in his blazer and khakis, off to brunch with his new family. I watched his car disappear down the drive, and I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Let him have his brunch. Let him gloat. His victory was going to be so short-lived. My first act of revenge was quiet. It happened in a sleek, modern office with a view of the city. Elizabeth Vance was everything I'd hoped for. In her 50s, with sharp gray eyes, a no-nonsense bob, and a presence that commanded the room. She listened as I laid out the forged deed and the financial documents I'd secretly photocopied. Okay, Eleanor, she said, steepling her fingers. This is good. This is a start, but it's not enough. A forgery charge is serious, but it's his word against yours. We need to know why. We need to follow the money. We need to box him in so tightly he has no choice but to surrender. She assembled a team. A forensic accountant, a private investigator named Miles who looked like a kindly grandfather but had the eyes of a hawk, and a digital forensics expert. Our mission was to unravel David's and Charles Kensington's entire financial web. We needed to find the source of the, quote, valuable consideration he'd paid for my house. We needed to know where every penny of that $1.2 million he wanted was really going. The investigation was slow, painstaking, and conducted in absolute secrecy. I became a ghost. I'd meet Miles in library study rooms, handing him USB drives with files I'd copied from David's computer when he was asleep. I'd have hushed calls with Elizabeth from the gardening aisle at the hardware store. I learned about shell companies, offshore accounts, and asset laundering. It turned out Charles Kensington's empire was a house of cards, built on debt and risky investments. The merger wasn't about growth, it was about survival. David's company, our solid, profitable company, was to be the life raft. My home's equity was to be the bailout money. The pieces were falling into place. The betrayal was so much deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. David wasn't just dazzled. He was trapped, and he was willing to sacrifice me, his wife of 25 years, to save himself and his new friends. The final piece of the puzzle came from the most unexpected place. Chloe. She came home one afternoon to grab the rest of her things. She was leaving for the Bahamas in a week. She was buzzing with excitement, barely looking at me as she threw clothes into a suitcase. Mom, can you believe it? Bradley's dad is giving us a villa right on the beach. As a wedding present. I froze. I was folding a sweater at the foot of her bed. Wedding present? She didn't catch the tone in my voice. Yeah, we decided. We're getting married down there. Just a small, intimate ceremony, family only. She said the word family, and her eyes flicked to me for a second. Just a second, with a flicker of something that might have been guilt, but was quickly extinguished. It'll be so much more elegant than some big church wedding here. A small, intimate ceremony, family only, which clearly did not include me, the mother of the bride, exiled from my own daughter's wedding. Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. When were you planning on telling me this? She zipped her suitcase with a violent jerk. I'm telling you now, aren't I? God, Mom, don't start. Don't make this about you. This is about my future, my happiness. Why can't you just be happy for me? It was the same script, the same manipulation. But this time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt a white-hot rage. They had poisoned my child against me. They had turned my own daughter into a weapon to be used against me. Get out, I said. She blinked. What? Get out of my house. I stood up, my entire body trembling with the force of my control. You have made your choice. You have chosen your new family. Go to them. But you do not get to stand in the room I painted for you, surrounded by the memories I built for you, and tell me I don't belong. Get out. She looked shocked, then angry. She grabbed her suitcase. Fine. I didn't want to be here anyway. It's pathetic. She stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled. I stood in her empty room, surrounded by the faded glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, and I didn't cry. I made a promise to myself, to the little girl who used to sleep under those stars. I would get her back. I would rip her free from their toxic grip, even if she hated me for it. The stage for the final confrontation was set not by me, but by them. A week later, an engraved invitation arrived. It was thick, creamy cardstock. It was for a celebration of partnership and family at the Kensington estate. It was, for all intents and purposes, an engagement party for Chloe and Bradley and a launch party for Croft Kensington Engineering. It was to be held in 2 days. David was practically giddy. This is it, Ellie. The big night. Charles is pulling out all the stops. Everyone will be there. The mayor, the press. You have to be there. You have to show a united front. His tone made it clear it was not a request. It was a command performance. The reluctant wife trotted out to prove everything was fine. I looked at the invitation. The Kensington estate. Their territory. Their rules. The perfect place for an ambush. I smiled at David, a sweet, submissive smile. Of course, David. I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The day of the party, I put on the armor Elizabeth Vance and I had prepared. I wore a simple black dress. Elegant, understated. My war paint was minimal. I looked like myself, only sharper, harder. I placed a small, innocuous-looking clutch on my bed. Inside was not lipstick or a compact. It was a digital voice recorder, turned on. And a copy of the forged deed, folded neatly. The Kensington estate was a palace. Cars worth more than most houses lined the sweeping driveway. Valets in red jackets scurried about. The air hummed with money and influence. Inside, it was a whirl of crystal chandeliers, circulating waiters with silver trays, and the sound of a string quartet. Everyone who was anyone in Crestwood was there, mingling, laughing, sipping champagne. David gripped my elbow tightly, his smile plastered on for the crowd. See? Isn't this wonderful? He hissed in my ear. Just smile and nod. Don't embarrass me. I saw Chloe across the room. She was radiant in a silver gown, hanging on Bradley's arm, laughing at something Charles Kensington was saying. She looked like a princess in a fairy tale. A poisoned fairy tale. Vanessa glided over to us. David, Eleanor, so glad you could make it. She air-kissed my cheek. That's a brave choice of color, my dear. She looked me up and down. Come, the presentations are about to begin. She led us to a lavishly decorated banquet hall. A head table was set on a dais. There were place cards. David's was at the center, next to Charles's. Chloe and Bradley were there. There was no place card for me. Vanessa noticed this with a theatrical gasp. Oh dear. There must have been a mistake with the seating arrangements. Don't worry, Eleanor. We'll find a little table for you in the back. I'm sure you won't mind. Her smile was vicious. David looked momentarily uncomfortable, but then he shrugged. It's fine, Ellie. Just go sit down. I'll find you later. This was it. The final public humiliation. The confirmation that I did not belong. But I didn't move. I stood my ground, right in the center of the aisle, as the room began to quiet down for the speeches. Charles Kensington tapped the microphone. Welcome, friends. Thank you for coming to celebrate with us tonight. We're here to celebrate two wonderful unions. The union of our families, through the upcoming marriage of my son Bradley to the lovely Chloe Croft. Polite applause. Chloe beamed. And the union of our businesses, the merging of Kensington Developments with the solid, if somewhat modest, foundation of Croft Engineering. The condescension was thick. David's smile was fixed, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. Charles droned on about synergy and vision and the future. Then he called David up. And now, the man of the hour, my new partner, Dave Croft. David walked up to the podium, chest puffed out, accepting the applause. He launched into a speech that was clearly written by Charles, full of corporate buzzwords and praise for the Kensington vision. He didn't mention the garage. He didn't mention the picnics. He didn't mention me. He finished to more applause. Then he said, and now, I'd like to bring up the real star of the show, my beautiful daughter, Chloe. Chloe floated up to the podium, kissing David on the cheek. She took the microphone. Thank you, Daddy. She looked out at the crowd. I am so blessed to have a father who has built such an amazing future for us, and to be welcomed into the Kensington family with such open arms. I finally feel like I've found my place, my real family. The words were a dagger, twisted in front of hundreds of people. She looked over at me then, her gaze cool and dismissive. And to those who couldn't be happy for me, who tried to hold me back, well, I guess some people just don't belong at this table. The room was dead silent. Every eye turned to me, standing alone in the aisle, the pitying stares, the whispered comments. This was their victory lap. This was them, stomping on the ashes of my life. David was beaming, so proud of his daughter's cruelty. Charles had a smug, satisfied look. Vanessa's smile was a razor blade. I took a deep breath. And I started to clap. A slow, deliberate, solitary clap that echoed in the silent hall. All eyes snapped back to me. Bravo, I said, my voice clear and carrying, amplified by the stunned silence. What a beautiful performance. Really, it's almost convincing. David's face went pale. Ellie, he hissed, sit down, you're making a scene. Oh, I'm just getting started, David, I said, walking toward the dais. You said I didn't belong at this table. You're right. I don't belong at a table built on lies, theft, and fraud. Charles Kensington stepped forward, his face purple with rage. Security! Remove this hysterical woman immediately. Two large men started moving toward me. I wouldn't do that if I were you, a new authoritative voice rang out. Elizabeth Vance stepped out from the side of the room, followed by two men in suits who looked decidedly more official than the Kensingtons. Security. My client is exercising her right to address a matter of public and personal fraud. The room was in an uproar. Cameras flashed. This was better than any party they'd ever been to. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the folded deed. I held it up. My husband, the man you just applauded, gave a lovely speech about the future. I said, my voice ringing out. He forgot to mention how he financed his part of it, by forging my name on a quitclaim deed and stealing the house we built together. The house I sold my pearls for, the house I raised our daughter in. He sold our past for a seat at your table, Charles. Gasps filled the room. David's face was a mask of sheer terror. She's lying, it's a lie. The forensic document examiner from the state police will be the judge of that. Elizabeth said calmly. "The original document is already in their possession." I turned to Charles. "And you. You didn't just buy a business partner, you bought a willing accomplice. Where did that valuable consideration really go, Charles? The $1.2 million you needed from the equity of my home? Was it to cover the losses from your failed investments in the Caymans? The ones you've been hiding from your investors?" Charles's jaw dropped. He looked from me to David, his eyes wide with panic. "I don't know what she's talking about." "The SEC might," Elizabeth said, nodding to one of the men with her, who flashed a badge. "We've been working with them. They're very interested in your books, Mr. Kensington." The scene was pure chaos. Reporters were scribbling furiously. Guests were pulling out their phones, recording everything. David looked like he was going to be sick. Chloe was staring at me, her face white, her hand clutching Bradley's arm, his own expression stunned and horrified. I saved the final blow for her. I looked directly at my daughter. "And you, Chloe, you said you finally found your real family, a family that taught you that love is conditional. That family is something you use and discard when it's no longer useful. They bought you with a villa and a fancy wedding. But a real mother would have sold her soul to protect you from people like this. I guess you were right. I don't belong at this table, because I could never stomach the company." I turned my back on them, on the dais of shame, on the ruins of my marriage, on the daughter who had broken my heart. And I walked out, Elizabeth Vance at my side, the sound of a perfect society tearing itself apart echoing behind me. The aftermath was a tidal wave that swept through Crestwood. David was arrested for forgery and fraud before the party was even over. The SEC froze all of Kensington Development's assets and launched a full-scale investigation, uncovering a massive Ponzi scheme. Charles Kensington was indicted on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The merger was exposed as a sham, a desperate attempt to use David's legitimate company to prop up his collapsing empire. Vanessa Kensington, her social status obliterated, filed for divorce and fled the state. Bradley, his trust fund evaporated and his name toxic, broke off the engagement with Chloe, leaving her utterly alone. The house was mine, of course. The deed was nullified. The court awarded me sole ownership, along with a significant portion of what was left of David's company after the Kensington mess was untangled. It wasn't about the money. It was about justice. David pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. I visited him once, in prison. He looked old, shrunken, stripped of his expensive suits and his arrogance. "Why, David?" was all I could ask. "Why did you do it? Was it worth it?" He couldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to be someone. He made me feel important. "I got lost, Ellie. I'm so sorry." Sorry wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had died long before this meeting. I left without saying another word. The hardest part was Chloe. She was adrift, humiliated, her fairy tale castle revealed to be a house of cards. She showed up at the house on Oak Crest a week after the party. She looked like a ghost of the girl in the silver gown. "Mom," she whispered, standing on the porch, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I was so stupid. They told me you were unstable, that you were jealous, that you were trying to ruin Dad's big chance. They made me think." I didn't hug her, not right away. The wound was too fresh. "They preyed on your ambition, Chloe, on your desire for a shiny, easy life. But you let them. You chose to believe them. You chose to hurt me." "I know," she sobbed. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I had nowhere else to go." I looked at my daughter, my little girl, broken and lost. The anger was still there, a cold stone in my chest. But beneath it was a love that, despite everything, had never truly died. "You can stay," I said, my voice quiet, "but it's not going to be easy. Trust isn't given, Chloe. It's earned, and you have a lot of earning to do." She nodded, crying harder, and took a tentative step inside. The road to rebuilding our relationship would be long, and it would never be the same as it was. But it was a start. I sit now at the dining table, the same one. The sun streams through the windows, catching the dust motes, dancing in the air. It's just me. The house is quiet. But the silence is no longer lonely. It's peaceful. It's mine. They tried to take my home. They tried to take my family. They tried to tell me I didn't belong. But a seat at the table isn't given. It's claimed, it's built, it's defended. They showed me the worst of people, but in doing so, they showed me the best of myself. A strength I never knew I had. A resilience that can only be forged in the fire of absolute betrayal. My story is a reminder to everyone who has ever been made to feel small, who has ever been told they don't belong, who has ever had their love used as a weapon against them. Your greatest revenge is not anger. It's not bitterness. It is your quiet, unshakable strength. It is your ability to rebuild, to reclaim your space, to sit at the head of your own table, in your own home, and own your story. They thought they could erase me. Instead, they made me indelible. If you're facing your own battle, your own betrayal, remember that. The chapter they end is not your whole story. It's just the beginning of your comeback.